Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dev Diary. Today we're looking at my attempt to kind of demake Lethal Company and the madness that ensued. So before we get into said madness, remember to leave a like if you enjoyed today's video and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Make sure notifications are also turned on so you don't miss future videos. So Lethal Company is, at least at the time that I'm recording this, just becoming the new hotness. And as far as I can tell, when, people aren't sabotaging each other, it's a game about avoiding monsters and hazards while collecting scrap for money. Now, levels seemed randomly generated, and if you've been following my channel, you probably know where this is going. That's right, it's the return of the dungeon generator based on images, only updated with a few new features. The main difference is the inclusion of a new color check, meaning we can now check for walls, empty spaces, and walkways. This data is then saved and fed into two different layers. Why two? Because walls and walkways needed to be separated in order to implement another new feature, auto tiling. Thanks to some simple bit masking, when our tiles are synced, walls and walkways are altered to display proper edges as opposed to a simple default tile, giving our levels a bit more personality as a result. Now, majority of this code is very similar to previous projects of similar type. Basically, if you've seen my Backrooms demake, we're coming in with a very similar approach. Our player is controlled via WASD with the ability to run with shift. The player is also able to grab scrap found throughout the level with E. Scrap is placed in the bin that spawns next to the player at the beginning of the level, which will reward the player with however much money said piece of scrap is worth. Now, physics were enabled for one specific reason that we will get to in a second, and given how much extra code was needed to make it work with the grab system and everything, I'm not sure it was worth it. Still, physics exist, but they're somewhat clunky because the collision system is tile-based, which I found out does not work so well with gamemaker's physics system. In fact, the amount of extra work and code needed to account for the physics was where the madness began. But anyway, there was much more to the game than just physics, such as the dangers/monsters inhibiting our levels, which were only slightly inspired by Lethal Company's, mostly because, again, at the time I recorded this, there was very little known about how many of them worked, and so instead I've gone with ideas similar in nature or more expected for this type of game, starting with the Weeper. Now, if you've played SCP or watched Doctor Who, you know where we're going with such a name. Yep, when within range, if the player does not continue to look at this monster, it will quickly begin to move towards them. And thankfully, the view check isn't too strict because it's arguably one of the less aggressive monsters in this project. That title probably goes to the Creeper. Similar to the Weeper, but it doesn't care if the player's looking at it. As long as they've got line of sight, they will chase the player until the out of view range. Now, their behavior is based on the monster from my Backrooms demake, only this version has full 360-degree vision. And the vision check, along with the player's flashlight, are a variation of the code used for the laser beam from my Wall World inspired project. The next monster on the list is the Mimic, which is pretty self-explanatory. It looks almost exactly like some scrap, and if the player attempts to pick it up, they are instantly eliminated. And this thing is why I wanted physics enabled. In case the player misses the fact that mimics look slightly different, the fact that they do not have any physics should be the dead giveaway to avoid at all costs. Now, the turret is arguably the only thing directly inspired by Lethal Company and works almost exactly the same way. There's a 2-second charge period before it'll begin open firing on the player. Again, it's thankfully slow in turning and short on range, so at the very least it's no sniper. And obviously, if we were going full bore on this, there would be added sounds and effects to help convey the danger. And so, our final monster comes as a package deal with one of the lootable items, and was a very late addition to the project. One of the lootable scraps is a golden orb. Should the player pick up this orb, it will begin to attract every single guardian that exists in the level. And what makes this even scarier is the fact that the orb specifically spawns 1 to 3 guardians each. Now, should the player leave the orb alone, the guardians are pretty easy to avoid. They're proximity based, so as long as the player stays away, they will not attract the ire of these creatures. But again, grabbing an orb will literally attract all of them to the player's position until it is dropped. And even then, should the player still be within danger distance, guardians will continue the pursuit. And that was sadly about all I was able to get to for this session. More was planned, like an actual gameplay loop and more monsters, but the additions to the level generator and the unexpected annoyances of the physics system were costly on time. Also, I tried getting an Among Us style vision cone to work for the flashlight, but it was way harder to get done using tiles than objects, which was extremely frustrating. So yep, the lighting needs work because right now it looks really awkward. In fact, in order to get much of this done in time for the video, I started taking shortcuts everywhere. Like, so much so that should we continue working on this one, I may need to redo the whole thing from scratch because the wires are already starting to get messy. So as always, if you would like to see this one continue, let me know. Regardless, I would love to hear any and all thoughts that you may have on this one, so be sure to leave them in the comments. And if you would like to play some other games that have been featured previously here on the channel, including the aforementioned Backrooms demake, or maybe you want early access to the weekly videos, subscribe to my Patreon. With that said, brings us to the end of today's Dev Diary, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.